Get your black hands off my desk. Stanley Walker freezes. 68 years old, 14 years cleaning this building, not a single complaint. Derek Callahan towers over him. CEO tailored suit. Diamond watch worth $45,000. My PC Philippe is missing. You people see something shiny. You can't help yourselves. His lip curls. Empty your pockets now. Stanley doesn't move at first. Not because he's guilty, because shock has weight. 14 years in this building. 14 winters, walking through those revolving doors before dawn. 14 summers, mopping marble floors so spotless they reflected men who never once learned his name. And now, in a single breath, he's been reduced to an accusation. Thief. The executive floor feels colder than the rest of the building. The lights are dimmer here, softer, meant for comfort, not clarity. Leather chairs, glass desks, silence thick enough to suffocate. Stanley slowly lifts his hands. They tremble, not with fear but restraint. "Sir," he says quietly, voice steady despite the burn in his chest. "I haven't taken anything." Derek Callahan scoffs. 42 years old. 8 months into his role as CEO. The kind of man who believes power announces itself before he speaks. His diamond watch, usually flashing with every careless gesture, is conspicuously absent now. "Save it!" Callahan snaps. "I left it on my desk. Now it's gone, and you were the only one on this floor." "That's not correct," Stanley replies. "I was assigned to 12 tonight. Security called me up." Callahan steps closer. Too close. "You people always have excuses." 2 security guards stand nearby. Neither speaks. One shifts uncomfortably. The other avoids eye contact entirely. Callahan grabs Stanley's work bag before Stanley can react and flips it upside down. The contents scatter across the marble. A lunch container, a flashlight, cleaning cloths, a worn brown wallet. From it slips a single photograph. A woman smiling gently, seated beside a younger man in a graduation cap. Stanley's fingers twitch toward it instinctively, protectively, but he stops himself. There's no watch, no diamonds, nothing of value. The room goes quiet. For a fraction of a second, doubt flickers across Callahan's face, then it hardens into something uglier. "Check his pockets," he orders. Stanley exhales once, slowly. Then he does it himself. Keys, a few dollars, a gas receipt. Nothing more. Callahan straightens, embarrassed but not apologetic. "You hid it," he says coldly. "Somewhere in this building. And when we find it, I'll make sure you're prosecuted. Grand theft." The word hangs in the air like a verdict already passed. Stanley bends down, carefully gathers his belongings, and places the photograph back into his wallet. He looks at it for half a second longer than necessary. Then he stands. He does not beg. He does not argue. He does not explain himself again. Because some men don't want the truth. They want a target, and tonight, Stanley Walker has been chosen. Stanley doesn't know it yet, but someone else saw what happened that night. And within 72 hours, the man who humiliated him will wish he'd never opened his desk drawer. Stanley Walker leaves the executive floor the same way he always has, quietly. The service elevator doors slide shut behind him, sealing off the polished marble, the leather chairs, the air that smells faintly of money and arrogance. As the elevator descends, Stanley stares at the numbers blinking above the door. 37, 36, 35. Each floor feels heavier than the last. By the time the doors open in the basement, his shoulders ache like he's carried something far heavier than a mop bucket. The parking garage is mostly empty. A few luxury sedans sit untouched, their alarms blinking lazily. Stanley's 12-year-old Honda waits in its usual corner, paint chipped, windshield cracked from a stone last winter. He unlocks it, sits behind the wheel, and rests his hands there longer than necessary. For the first time in 14 years, he doesn't know if he'll be back tomorrow. At home, the lights are low. Eleanor is asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chest, television murmuring to no one. Stanley pauses at the doorway, watching her breathe. 66 years old. A heart that's given them warnings lately. Monthly medications that don't ask whether a paycheck shows up or not. He gently wakes her. "You're home early," she says, blinking. "Got sent home," he answers. She studies his face. 40 years of marriage have trained her to hear what he isn't saying. Sent home. How? Some confusion at work, Stanley replies. They said to take a couple days. Eleanor nods, but worry settles behind her eyes. She doesn't push. She never does, not right away. They sit at the kitchen table in silence, clock ticking between them. Stanley stares at his hands. The same hands accused of stealing something he's never touched. Across the city, the story begins spreading before sunrise. By 8:12 a.m., an email circulates quietly through management channels. Subject: Incident report. Executive floor by 9-1. Whispers move faster than emails. Did you hear? The janitor. Diamond watch. 45 grand. Nobody says Stanley's name. They don't need to. At 9:32 a.m., his badge is deactivated. Access denied. 14 years erased with a single keystroke. By noon, Derek Callahan sits comfortably in the executive dining room, recounting the unfortunate situation to two board members over lunch. His tone is calm, professional, regretful. These things are always disappointing, he says, shaking his head. But we have protocols. No one asks what evidence exists. No one asks whether cameras were checked. Why would they? At 10:48 p.m. that night, Stanley tries to enter the building, habit pulling him there before his mind can catch up. The turnstile doesn't move. The young security guard barely looks at him. Sorry, sir, you're not cleared anymore. Stanley nods once and turns away. What no one notices is a woman standing near the stairwell inside the lobby. She's holding a tablet, pretending to review reports, but her eyes follow Stanley until he disappears into the night. Grace Thornton doesn't believe in coincidences, and what she saw on the executive floor won't let her sleep. Grace Thornton knows numbers don't lie. And the building's own systems are about to tell a story Derek Callahan never planned for anyone to hear. Grace Thornton has spent 6 years as a senior auditor at Cornerstone Capital Partners. She's built a career on patterns, on finding the quiet inconsistencies others overlook. Numbers talk to her, timelines whisper. And when they don't align, she listens harder. The incident with Stanley Walker stays with her longer than it should. At 2:14 a.m. the following night, Grace sits alone in her office, blinds drawn. The glow of her monitor reflects off stacks of financial reports she no longer sees. She logs into the security archive. Camera, FL38 exec date November 14th. The footage loads slowly. 1:47 a.m. There he is. Derek Callahan steps into his office alone. His suit jacket is open. No tie. His movements are sharp, agitated. Grace pauses the frame, zooms in. On his wrist, clear as day, the diamond watch. She advances the footage frame by frame. At 1:49, Callahan lifts his hand. At 1:50, the watch is gone. At 1:52, he exits the office, wrist bare. Grace leans back in her chair. Her fingers move fast now. She pulls the badge logs. Stanley Walker, Janitor Station B, Floor 12, 1:47 a.m. Time-stamped, verified, logged to the second, 26 floors apart. Same moment, impossible. Grace's stomach tightens. She pulls another record, email archives. It doesn't take long. From Derek Callahan to HR Director. Time, 2:45 a.m. Subject, immediate termination. Terminate immediately, no appeal. Diamond watch worth $45,000. Grand theft. Sent before security completed a report, before footage was reviewed, before anyone looked for the truth. Grace exhales slowly. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. She opens another file, expense reports. Something she flagged months ago but was told to drop. Cash withdrawals, casino charges, numbers that never quite added up. Then she finds it. A debt collection notice, 6 figures, urgent, threatening. Grace closes her eyes. The picture forms all at once. The watch wasn't stolen. It was hidden. And Stanley Walker wasn't accused because he was guilty. He was accused because he was convenient. Grace saves everything. Screenshots, clips, logs, emails. She copies them to a USB drive and slips it into her pocket, just as her screen flickers. A new request appears in the system. Archive deletion. Executive floor. Priority. They're trying to erase it. Grace checks the clock. Less than 24 hours left. She stands, grabs her coat, and makes a decision that will change everything. Silence has a limit, and tonight she's crossed it. Derek Callahan thinks he's deleting the past, but he has no idea how many people saw the truth and how close it is to destroying him. Stanley Walker wakes before dawn out of habit. For 14 years, his body has known the rhythm better than any clock. Even now, with nowhere to go, his eyes open at 4:52 a.m. He lies still, staring at the ceiling, listening to Eleanor's breathing beside him. Steady, thank God. He slips out of bed quietly and makes coffee. The kitchen smells the same. The world feels different. By 7:15 a.m., Eleanor is dressed and waiting by the door, purse in hand. "I have my cardiology appointment," she says gently. "You're driving." Stanley nods. He prefers it that way. In the hospital, the waiting room hums with quiet anxiety. Eleanor disappears behind double doors. Stanley sits alone, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. His phone buzzes. A text from Marcus Brown. "Stanley, you okay?" Marcus, 52, 8 years cleaning the same floors, one of the few men who ever spoke to Stanley like a person instead of furniture. "I'm fine," Stanley types, "just taking some time off." A lie. A small one. Marcus doesn't reply right away. When he does, it's only 3 words. "I saw something." Stanley stares at the screen. Before he can respond, a nurse calls his name. Eleanor's appointment runs long. By the time they're back in the car, the sun is high and the city looks no different than it did 3 days ago, unaware, unconcerned. That evening, Stanley's phone rings again. Unknown number. "Mr. Walker," a woman's voice says, calm, controlled. "My name is Grace Thornton. I work at Cornerstone Capital Partners." Stanley's grip tightens. "I believe you were wrongly accused," she continues. "And I have evidence." Silence stretches between them. "Why are you telling me this?" Stanley finally asks. "Because the truth is being erased," Grace replies, "and because someone like you deserves better." They agree to meet the next afternoon, with a lawyer Grace trusts. Stanley hangs up and sits very still. For the first time since that night, something shifts in his chest. Across town, Derek Callahan pours himself another drink. His phone buzzes with an alert from IT. Someone accessed the executive floor footage. Multiple times. The name attached to the access makes his jaw tighten. Grace Thornton, the same auditor who questioned his expenses months ago. He doesn't hesitate. He sends the email. "Drop whatever you're working on. This is an order." Then another. "Accelerate deletion. I want everything gone by end of day." Derek stares at the locked desk drawer. The watch is still there. Safe. For now. Stanley finally has someone on his side. But Derek Callahan is about to prove just how far he'll go to protect his lie. The hospital room is quiet, except for the steady beep of a monitor. Eleanor lies pale against white sheets, IV taped to her arm. Stanley sits beside her, holding her hand like it might slip away if he lets go. "Cardiac event," the doctor said earlier. "Stress-related." Stanley knows exactly what that means. Eleanor studies his face when they're alone. "You've been carrying something," she says softly. "Don't deny it." He exhales slowly. "They accused me of stealing," he admits. "A watch, $45,000. Her hand tightens around his. "I didn't do it," he adds quickly. "I know," Eleanor says without hesitation. The certainty in her voice breaks something inside him. "They suspended me," he continues. "Probably fired. 14 years gone." Eleanor closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them with a strength that surprises him. "They can take your job," she says. "They can take your badge. But they don't get to decide who you are." He looks at her, tears burning behind his eyes. "You're an honest man," she continues. "You always have been, and the truth has a way of finding air." That night, Stanley receives another message, from Grace. "I have footage, badge logs, emails. The CEO hid the watch himself." Stanley reads it twice, then a third time. The next afternoon, they meet in a modest law office far from downtown. No marble floors, no glass desks, just shelves of worn books and the smell of coffee. Rachel Simmons listens without interrupting as Grace lays everything out. The footage, the timestamps, the email demanding Stanley's termination before any investigation. Rachel leans back when it's done. "This isn't just wrongful termination," she says. "This is defamation, and possibly fraud." Stanley clears his throat. "There's something else you should know." They both look at him. "My son," Stanley says quietly, "is Harold Walker, chairman of the board." Silence. Rachel smiles slowly. "That explains why this case just got very interesting." Across the city, Derek Callahan receives confirmation. Archive deletion complete. He smiles for the first time in days. What he doesn't know is that every file already lives somewhere else, and the board meeting scheduled for Friday has nothing to do with projections. Derek Callahan thinks the evidence is gone, but the board is about to hear a truth he can't delete, and a name he never expected to face. The board meeting is scheduled for Friday morning, mandatory attendance, no agenda listed. That detail alone unsettles Derek Callahan. By Thursday night, he's pacing his office, jacket off, tie loosened, fingers drumming against the edge of his desk. Outside the glass walls, the city glows, indifferent, endless. Inside the locked drawer sits the diamond watch, silent and damning. He opens the drawer again. The PC Philippe rests exactly where he left it. 36 diamonds catching the desk lamp like tiny, accusing eyes. He tells himself, again, that no one can prove anything. The footage is gone. The archives are wiped. Grace Thornton is isolated, cornered, one bad performance review away from silence. He closes the drawer. At the same time, across the city, Stanley Walker sits in a hard plastic chair outside Eleanor's hospital room. She's sleeping now, color returning slowly to her cheeks. "Stanley hasn't left the building in hours." His phone buzzes. Rachel Simmons. "Everything's in motion," she says. "The board will see the evidence tomorrow, all of it." Stanley swallows. "I told Harold not to interfere." Rachel's voice is calm. "He isn't. He's letting the truth speak." Stanley looks through the glass at Eleanor. 40 years of shared mornings, shared sacrifices, a life built quietly, honestly. "I never wanted special treatment," Stanley says. "You're not getting it," Rachel replies. "You're getting justice." That evening, Marcus Brown signs his statement. His hand shakes as he writes. 52 years old, 2 kids, mortgage still unpaid. He knows what testifying means. He also knows what silence costs. "I saw the watch," he tells Rachel again. 15 minutes after the CEO said it was stolen. "I know what I saw." Grace watches him sign, gratitude heavy in her chest. "Once this goes public," Marcus says quietly, "there's no going back." Grace nods. "There never is." Across town, Harold Walker stands alone in his office on the 40th floor. Looking out over the same city his father has cleaned for more than a decade. He remembers offering Stanley early retirement, a desk job, easier hours. "I don't need favors," his father had said. "I need work." Tomorrow, Harold knows, that dignity will finally be acknowledged or exposed. The boardroom doors are about to close, and when they reopen, one man's career will be over, whether he's ready or not. The boardroom fills slowly. 7 leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows. Morning light spilling across a table polished to perfection. Derek Callahan sits straight-backed, attorney beside him, confidence practiced and intact. Harold Walker enters last. He takes the head of the table without ceremony. "Let's begin," Harold says. Grace Thornton is first. She connects her laptop to the screen. No speeches, no drama, just facts. On November 14th at 1:47 a.m., Derek Callahan entered his office wearing the diamond watch. The footage plays. Callahan's jaw tightens as he watches himself on screen. The diamonds flash unmistakably. At 1:49, Grace continues, he removed the watch and placed it inside his desk drawer. Frame by frame. Clear, undeniable. At 1:52, he exited the office without it. At 2 a.m., he reported the watch stolen. Grace switches slides. Badge records show Stanley Walker was on floor 12 at 1:47 a.m., 26 floors away. Another slide. An email sent at 2:45 a.m. demanded Mr. Walker's immediate termination. No investigation. The room is silent. Then Marcus Brown speaks. I saw the watch on Mr. Callahan's wrist at 2:15 a.m. in the lobby, he says, after it was supposedly stolen. Callahan's attorney rises. I asked for facts, Harold says calmly. We're getting them. Grace brings up the final slide. Gambling debts, cash withdrawals, casino timestamps. The watch, she concludes, was never stolen. It was hidden. Thomas Bennett clears his throat. Mr. Callahan, do you have an explanation? Callahan opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Harold stands. One final clarification, he says, voice steady. Stanley Walker, the man accused, is my father. The color drains from Callahan's face. I didn't know, he whispers. No, Harold replies, you didn't care. The vote is swift. Termination. Referral to prosecutors. Full public correction. The boardroom door opens. Dad, Harold says, you can come in now. Stanley Walker steps forward. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Derek Callahan thought he controlled the narrative, but the truth just walked into the room, and it knows his name. Stanley Walker stands in the boardroom longer than he expects to. Not because anyone asks him to speak, but because no one rushes him out. For the first time in 14 years, the room is quiet for him, not around him. No whispered jokes, no averted eyes, no assumptions. Derek Callahan gathers his papers with shaking hands. The watch is no longer in his possession. Security will handle that. Prosecutors will handle the rest. As Callahan passes Stanley, he slows. I'm sorry, he mutters. Stanley looks at him calmly. Not with anger. Not with triumph. With respect, Stanley says. You're sorry you got caught. Callahan flinches. The door closes behind him. Grace exhales a breath she's been holding for days. Marcus lowers his eyes, relief and fear mixing in his chest. Harold places a hand lightly on his father's shoulder. It's over, Harold says. Stanley nods. Good. Outside the boardroom, news spreads faster than truth ever did. By noon, HR releases a correction. By 1:30, an internal memo clears Stanley Walker of all wrongdoing. By 3:00, Derek Callahan's name is trending, for all the wrong reasons. That evening, Stanley returns home early. Eleanor is sitting at the kitchen table, newspaper folded neatly beside her. She looks up as he enters. They called, she says. Stanley sets down his coat. I figured they might. They apologized, Eleanor continues. Formally. Sounded nervous. Stanley smiles faintly. They usually do. She studies him carefully. So, what happens now? Stanley thinks for a moment. I go back to work tomorrow. Eleanor raises an eyebrow. Do you want to? Stanley looks at his hands. The same hands that cleaned offices, held hers through sickness, were accused, and then cleared. Yes, he says. I do. The next morning, Stanley swipes his badge. Access granted. The turnstile clicks open. A few employees stop and stare. One begins to clap, hesitant at first, then louder. Another joins in, then another. Stanley doesn't bow, doesn't smile much. He simply walks forward, invisible no more. Stanley's name has been cleared, but justice isn't finished yet, not when reputations were destroyed so easily. The diamond watch sits in an evidence locker, cold, silent. 36 diamonds reflecting fluorescent light instead of admiration. Derek Callahan sits in a different kind of room now. Plain walls, hard chairs, no glass desks. His lawyer speaks in measured tones, but the words don't land. Fraud, defamation, evidence tampering, all because he thought power meant immunity. At Cornerstone, changes begin quietly. New leadership, new policies, mandatory bias training, cameras monitored independently, audits reviewed by third parties. Grace Thornton is promoted. She doesn't celebrate. She simply returns to her desk and opens a new file. Marcus Brown keeps his job, so does his dignity. The whispers around him change from suspicion to respect. And Stanley Walker? Stanley returns to floor 12. Same mop, same cart, same routine. But something is different. People say his name now. Morning, Mr. Walker. Good to see you back. Thank you. At lunch, he receives a message from Harold. Proud of you. Stanley types back 3 words. Always was working. That night, Stanley and Eleanor sit on their porch, watching the sun disappear behind the city skyline. They tried to make you feel small, Eleanor says. They failed, Stanley replies. She leans against him. You taught our son well, Stanley smiles softly. So did you. The truth didn't need shouting. It didn't need power. It needed patience and courage. Stanley Walker went back to cleaning floors, but the people above him will never look down the same way again. The building settles into a new rhythm after Derek Callahan's removal. Not louder, not softer, just different. Policies change on paper first. Emails about accountability, ethics, renewed values. Posters appear in break rooms, meetings are held, statements are issued. But what really changes can't be emailed. It's the way people hesitate before making assumptions now. The way accusations are questioned instead of accepted. The way silence no longer feels safe. Stanley Walker notices it most during the night shift. He moves through the halls the same way he always has, steady, methodical, unhurried. But now, people speak when they see him. Some apologize awkwardly. Others simply nod with a respect that didn't exist before. One analyst stops him near the elevators. I'm sorry, she says quietly, for what they said, for what we believed. Stanley nods once. Thank you. That's all. He doesn't need confessions. He doesn't need praise. What matters is that something shifted. Across the city, the legal process grinds forward. Prosecutors subpoena records. Investigators reconstruct timelines. The footage Grace saved becomes central evidence, not just of theft, but of intent. Derek Callahan's gambling debts come fully into the open. The image he spent years crafting dissolves in weeks. The man who once accused an elderly janitor of greed now stands exposed as someone willing to destroy a life to protect his own lies. Public opinion turns quickly when facts replace rumors. Meanwhile, Stanley focuses on Eleanor. Her recovery is slow but steady. Morning walks replace hospital visits. Laughter returns in small, careful pieces. Some evenings, they sit together without speaking, content in the quiet. One afternoon, Harold comes by unannounced. He brings no briefcase, no agenda, just coffee. I've been offered the interim CEO role, Harold says. Stanley looks up. You taking it? I didn't want to, Harold admits. But the board asked, and after everything, I thought maybe I should. Stanley considers this. Remember, he says finally, titles don't make the man, choices do. Harold nods. I know, you taught me that. As Harold leaves, Stanley watches him go, pride mixed with something heavier. Not fear, responsibility. That night, Stanley cleans the executive floor again for the first time since the accusation. He pauses outside the former CEO's office. The desk is gone, the drawer empty, the space stripped of arrogance. Stanley turns on the light and begins to work. The building has changed, but the real test of justice isn't punishment. It's what happens after the truth comes out. Weeks pass. The story fades from headlines, replaced by newer scandals, louder outrage. That's how the world works. Attention moves on, but consequences don't. Derek Callahan is formally charged. His attorney negotiates. Plea discussions begin. The watch, once a symbol of success, remains sealed in an evidence bag, reduced to proof. At Cornerstone, Harold officially assumes leadership. His first decision is simple. He invites every contracted staff member, cleaners, security, maintenance, to a company-wide meeting. No speeches from a stage, no separation. We don't function without you, Harold says plainly, and we failed one of our own. Stanley doesn't attend. He's on his shift. Later that night, Harold finds him on floor 12. Why didn't you come? Harold asks. Stanley shrugs. Work needed doing. They stand together in the quiet hallway. I want you to retire, Harold says gently. With full benefits, whatever you need. Stanley considers it longer this time. Soon, he says. Not yet. Harold smiles. I figured. At home, Eleanor reads the newspaper aloud. They're calling you the man who exposed corporate arrogance, she says, amused. Stanley chuckles. I didn't expose anything, I just didn't lie. She folds the paper. That's usually enough. That evening, Stanley takes out his wallet and looks at the photograph again. The same one that slid across marble floors during his humiliation. He places it back carefully. The world didn't suddenly become fair. But it became more honest. And sometimes, that's the beginning. Stanley Walker cleans floors for a living. He always has, but now everyone knows exactly who he is. Stanley's story feels complete, but justice has one final moment left. Because endings matter, and this one still isn't finished. Stanley Walker retires quietly. No press release, no ceremony, no speeches in a marble lobby. On his last night, he clocks in the same way he always has. Badge swipe, soft beep, doors opening. He wears the same grey uniform, pushes the same cart, walks the same floors he's walked thousands of times before. But tonight, people notice. A security guard nods with respect. An analyst stops and says, "Thank you." A young intern steps aside and holds the door. Stanley finishes floor 12 just before dawn. He empties the final trash bin, rinses his mop, and returns the cart to its place. He signs the logbook carefully, hands steady. Stanley Walker. Final shift completed. He stands there for a moment longer than necessary. Then he turns off the light. At home, Eleanor is waiting with breakfast already on the table. She smiles when she sees him. Last day? She asks. Last day, he replies. They sit together as the sun rises. No rush, no alarms, no place they have to be. Later that week, a small envelope arrives from Cornerstone Capital Partners. Inside is a letter. Not from HR, not from legal, from the board. It thanks Stanley for his years of service, for his integrity, for reminding the company, quietly, what accountability looks like. Included is a lifetime benefits package, medical coverage for Eleanor, and a handwritten note from Harold. You taught me that power should protect people, not crush them. I won't forget. Stanley folds the letter and places it in the drawer beside Eleanor's medications. Months later, Derek Callahan's case concludes. No spectacle, no redemption arc, just consequences. The watch is auctioned as part of restitution. The proceeds go to a fund supporting workers wrongfully accused and terminated. Stanley never attends the hearing. He doesn't need to. Justice didn't ask him to witness it. One evening, Stanley walks past the building where he once cleaned in silence. The lights glow behind glass. New faces move inside. New ambitions rise and fall. Stanley doesn't stop. He has nothing left to prove. He was invisible once, accused once, doubted once. But the truth stood still long enough to be seen, and that was enough. Respect doesn't come from titles, money, or diamond watches. It comes from who you are when no one is watching. Stanley Walker never needed power to be right. He only needed time. And in the end, the truth spoke louder than any accusation ever could. If this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Like this video to honor the people whose work goes unseen. Subscribe for more stories where arrogance meets accountability and justice doesn't stay silent. And share this with someone who believes integrity still matters. Before you go, watch this powerful next story on your screen. Black CEO cancels $1 billion deal after billionaire laughed, dumping food on her. A billionaire thought humiliation was entertainment until she showed him what real power looks like. Click now. You won't believe how fast everything changes.